Good morning. How's everyone doing? So I've been told that I have a beautiful Caribbean accent, so if at any point in time you don't understand my accent, please raise your hand and I would slow down a little bit. So buckle your seats. This is exciting stuff. If you look at the screen, there's a reason why we have that. My talk is all about engaging both K through grade education in terms of how do we engage learning in an age of artificial intelligence and the fourth industrial revolution, and how do we teach differently? How do we lay off faculty a little bit, and in terms of not giving them so much responsibility to make magic in the classroom, but make them be a coach in the classroom? And how do we partner with companies like Microsoft in terms of being a translator and a mediator? So my role at Microsoft, I joined Microsoft like a year ago after 25 years in the academy. So my role is to sort of be in the middle as a technology translator, work with companies and work with the technology and be that educator continuously of how they could use technology appropriately. So I wanted to first start by talking a little bit of how higher education has changed and how education has changed traditionally. So we consider ourselves being in the fourth industrial revolution. So right now, if you look at the industrial revolution of 1780, we had an industrial revolution of 1870. We had one with information technology in 1970s, and now in 2017, and the task of each one of those industrial revolutions has been completely different in terms of how we educate, right? So we face now with a blurring of the physical and digital and biological spheres, and our challenge to educate students are very different from what it was before. So when you look at what is required of educators, you look at these are all the challenges that we have faced from K to grade in educating students in an age of artificial intelligence. We're working with Research One University right now, and I think the first thing the CEO and Vice President of Academic Affairs says is that he said two things. One, we don't have a problem with retention, so don't come and talk to us about retention. He said, but I'm challenged anybody to show me in the US or abroad a more decentralized university than ours, where data is everywhere and there's no way of locating all those data into a central repository so that we can look at patterns and trends and basically begin to get insightful information and use that for data-driven decision. One of the other things he said that really, really struck me is that he said, when you look at this slide, he says, we bring in students who are 4.50 and we dumb them down. And one of the reasons you're saying dumb them down is that there aren't the technologies that students survive outside the classroom that we are prepared to in terms inside the classroom. Think about it. We still lecture. We still lecture. We still lecture for an hour. And these kids' modus of operation is 5 minutes attention space is so much. So one of the things we challenge with is that we challenge with students' security, right? So we have all this information and we're collecting information, and we challenge with security, we challenge with optimizing students' experiences. One of the main aspects, the main project we're working on this Research One company at University we've seen a little bit, is modernizing the student experience. How do we modernize the students' experience? How do we use technology to disrupt students' experiences so the experiences on campus is seamless to the experience that they have off campus? And the demand for data-informed strategies, personalized learning experiences, those are just some of the challenges that we have. But when we talk about educating students in the age of AI and the fourth industrial revolution, we're talking about educating in this context. So think about your class if you're a professor or if you're an educator. The fact of the matter is that algorithms are mining troves of data right now. So think about any courses that fall within those lines. Then AI platforms and algorithms on Wall Street. If you are a nerd like myself, you're probably familiar with the quants of Wall Street that came to Wall Street in the 80s and started using algorithms or attempted to use algorithms to pick stocks, and although that wasn't too successful, some of the quants remained on Wall Street, and right now they're companies that just has no human being. They're through machine learning and patterns and recognition, they're selecting stocks for you. Then you're looking at robots in the military right now, even in China and who knows, in some places of the US, there are robots on the field that basically assisting soldiers. And then the last one I think is really, really cool, right? You know, any predictable or near predictable jobs are now in the purview of machines. I mean, think about it, right? So I love history, but think about history. Think about accounting. Anything that is repetitive, that doesn't require critical thinking, it's in the purview of machines. So what we need to do is not destroy those majors. What we need to do is to infuse certain capabilities and competencies that are required. So the reality in the fourth industrial revolution is that higher education demands more. There's more demanding of higher education to basically educate everyone at scale. And I want you to take a close look at these numbers because it really arrested me, right? So as I was coming up here, my colleague said, make sure you talk about primary education and secondary education. And that's the first item. Let that first item sink in you. 65% of students in grade school will perform a job that have not yet been invented. Think about that, right? Because the upper age of elementary school is 12 years old. Anybody have 12-year-old kids here? Grandkids? So think about that student who is 12 years old right now, in 5 years they're going to be in your universities. 5 years they're going to graduate from high school. And in 4 years they're going to graduate from a college, right? So that's 10 years. So my question for you is that in 5 years, or in 10 years, has your university begun to think about the art of the possible that the degrees or the content that goes on paper that you teach in the student may or may not help them? Or how are you modifying those pedagogies? How are you modifying the way the classroom, as students still sitting in a row? That doesn't happen again. Workforces change and people have changed the way they learn. So these are some statistics that I think any educator, you have to look at a statistic and you have to say, my God, are we doing the right thing? What is going to happen to our future if we don't make some changes? So when we talk about changes, one of the things we like to talk about is how do we disrupt student experiences with technology? I'm a graduate at MIT, and one of the things we always used to drive in our head is use appropriate technology, use appropriate technology. So that became sort of like our mantra. So we're not just talking about using any technology. We're talking about what is the appropriate technology you should use to disrupt students' experiences. And we're not saying this is not, don't think this is a positive statement. The students' experiences are not good right now, right? We need to disrupt that so we do some of these things. So this is our Research One institution that we're working with. And these are like 4 quadrants that they asked us to work at, 4 pillars. They say what we want you to do is to modernize the students. So this university is, in the next 5 years, is going to modernize 30 of the largest classrooms. You know those classrooms where you see students in rows and rows and rows. And you're going to see in a little bit what we're thinking about how they could modify those classrooms. They've set aside $6.5 million to do that. Who is doing that, right? That's commitment of a university because they realize they need to do something differently. We're talking about most Research One universities do a lousy job of advising first-year students, undergraduate students, because that's not a mission, right? You can't blame them. What the provost says is that, look, we want you as Microsoft to use technology to see how these educated students who come to us could do that. And so this is an example. This student is on the train and talking to professors, getting email, doing communication. So how do they communicate differently using conversational AI? And how do they use blockchain as a platform to communicate? I'm sure you didn't think about blockchain in higher education, but how do you use blockchain to use things like micro certifications and stuff like that, especially if you're talking about K to grade? So one of the things I wanted to sink in you a little bit is that statement in the middle there. That statement in the middle is really critical when we think about designing platforms for students. So this is a platform that we're designing, right? So these students expect you to have these things. They expect to come in that this university has an app for selecting their roommate, an app to order. They shouldn't be picking up the phone. That's what they're doing outside the classroom. So what we're trying to do at this university is to use technology to disrupt the negative activities and experiences, because as Vincent Tinto said, who is sort of like the father of retention, if we engage students in the first year or the first semester, we could retain them. And if we engage them, especially in the major, so think about a major having a platform like this rather than a university where they could basically engage students. So this is how institutions are modernizing. You know, we used to call this. One of my degrees is in architecture, and in an architecture studio, you would have this stuff where students are sitting around a table like you, right? And then the professor will come, like the professor in excuse me, the professor in the background there is going to come in and monitor what's happening on the students. So you have this collaboration of students, which is how you're going to operate when you work. So what this institution has realized is that not only do they need to put the money there, but they also need to have the right type of space, redesign the space, because the rows and rows and rows and rows of students are not really working in terms of preparing them for the workforce. So again, this is a student who is just a larger image of the students experiencing advising from the train in real time. I mean, they could do it, right? So this is an example. But one of the things we try to do when we go in, especially from the group that I work with, Microsoft Education Group, is that we try to bring our capabilities to the field, right? So we're not saying this is the technology you're going to use, but we're saying we often ask the question in terms of adaptive learning. What type of adaptive learning technologies we could use for our students? We also ask the question of how could we make data-driven decisions with our students? How could everything that the students do and move be captured so that we use that information to better engage them? What type of learning environments we need to have so the students learn better? How does IT and how does AI engage itself with the design of a building so we could have the appropriate building that simulates the type of learning these students need to be engaged in? And then open education, how could we collaborate more in terms of undergraduate research? I was just talking to my colleague from NSF, and one of the things I always tell faculty in my 25 years in the academy is how do you engage students in undergraduate research, because that's going to get them hooked about the profession. So how could we do that more in terms of thinking about it rather than just research, but how could we think about it in terms of workforce? So how does research become a catalyst for workforce? Those are the things that we're interested in at Microsoft. And then how do we use mixed reality, right? How do you take students out of a classroom and move them into somewhere that they can't basically go, but mixed reality can take them? And I love this saying by our CEO, if you change the way a student see the world, you can change how you see it, right? I mean, we got to take the students out to the classrooms. So one of the things we wanted to look at here is this is a classroom in which students are basically experiencing in mixed reality. And one of the things that the professor is talking about here, and obviously we show K through 12 here, but also university experiences, but he's saying that our students learn in real time, right? Why aren't we having technologies so the students could see? One professor says that, he gets so frustrated when he's writing on the board that he wished he had a three-dimensional board, and he's trying to turn the board. Have you ever been teaching and you kind of like, you want to turn that board, but it's not two-dimensional? So those are the things that these type of technology bringing into the classroom. You have students here who, if in a music program, but there aren't enough instruments, well, now you could use the lens and you could use mixed reality so those students could learn a trumpet, even if there isn't a real trumpet to play. I mean, it's the possibilities are endless. And that's why I really wanted to subtitle this, The Art of the Possible. So what are the things that you could do that's similar to this in your classroom that's going to promote students to want to learn so that we could prepare them for this workforce where we don't even know what they're going to be learning? And that's the cool thing about this. I mean, because we have lived in a society where we always know what was going to happen, or at least we had an indication. We don't know what the students are going to learn. So how do we as educators prepare them to be those critical thinkers? And how do we bring the tools that takes them out of the classroom so they can better understand the stuff? So these are some just an example. I was thinking, I'm coming to UMUC, and one of the largest online program in the world. How do we use this technology with UMUC, right? So as you could see here, the person on the screen is the professor, and what the professor is doing is basically helping the student solve a problem by bringing in new information to the student using exactly the same information and the same process I just showed here in the classroom. Other example is this student is basically being engaged to fix a part. And here we're showing a machinery, but it could be anything, right? It could be body parts, it could be history, it could be mathematics. But basically what you're basically trying to do is to engage the students with hands-on learning, right? The father of thoracic intelligence, Robert Sternberg often says that students should learn practically, analytically, and creatively. So not all our students learn from lectures. Some students had to get out there and they had to put their hands in it. So this tool allows you to remotely engage the student in terms of learning that you probably would not have been able to do. Here the student is looking at how do you experience the layout of a room. So it could be an interior designer, it could be an architect, here students, it could be how do you edit the physical design of the building, all being remote, but you're taking the student out of a two-dimension and you're moving them and lifting them into a three-dimension world that they exist in so that the technology could help them learn better. This is an example, and I thought this is one of our projects as well. The results so far speak for themselves. They had seen a 10% improvement in student test scores by using augmented reality, right? I mean, that just means that the students are not getting really brilliant. The students are understanding the information better. And hence the test scores. So we know that the school environment is improving and it's changing. Excuse me. But the other thing that's changing is, again, my colleague from NSF talked about workforce. The other thing that's changing is workforce is changing. So if the workforce is changing, what are the things that we are doing in order to help the workforce? And I wish we had the audio for this, but
cannot get new employees up to speed as fast as the experienced people are retiring. We need a better way forward. Introducing Dynamics 365 guides. Simple step-by-step instructions are easily written on a PC, and then holographic parts and icons are simply picked up and placed on the machine where the work is happening. From day one, employees are often expected to get work done, but the complexity can be overwhelming. Now, employees can learn by doing. This is a tool that works with existing processes, allowing a manager to get the right guides to their people. The instructions move with the employees, pointing them to the tools and parts they need, showing them exactly where they need to apply them. Employees get up to speed faster, with fewer errors and more confidence. A simple glance moves them through the instructions, meaning their hands are free to do the work. They can learn at their own pace without having to rely on other workers around them. The overall experience is comfortable and intuitive. For the first time, a manager can see detailed information about how the employees are working and how their skills are growing. This makes continuous improvement faster than ever before. All of this helps employees make the complex simple, so they can learn and adapt faster, and organizations can stay competitive.
I'm going to pause here because for me, I just want to leave you with one thing. I try to, when I speak and represent Microsoft, I try to leave the audience a little bit restless. So I'm going to try to do that today. Let me tell you why this is important to me, right? This is important to me because you hear my beautiful Caribbean accent. I'm from Trinidad in the Caribbean. I stand here before you after working in the academy for 25 years as a faculty, department chair, senior academic officer, college president, and I've never went to high school in my life. At the age of 11, most countries that were colonized by the British, at the age of 11, you sit an exam called Common Entrance Exam. If you fail that exam, you're considered doomed to society, which is what I was. If you pass that exam, you go on to high school. I'm one of 7 kids. My parents didn't have enough money for me to pay for private college. So I did everything I did to stay legal, right? I learned how to sew. I could sew this. I could sew any piece of clothes that you have on. I learned tailoring. And at 17, there was this professor from England who was traveling to Trinidad. And she asked me, do I want to participate in this program, which was, remember, 17 is when you graduate from high school, which was students who graduated from high school and failed, they were going to repeat the courses. So I said, well, yeah, I jumped it. There was a Monday afternoon, I picked up my copybook, we used to call it home, and then I went with her, and I always said that God has a sense of humor because I'd never gone to high school, and he took me in a calculus class. But I had an ace in the hole. My brother was a mathematician, and my brother taught me everything I knew. In order to go to those classes, I had to work to pay for the classes. I used to put on the morning a pickaxe on my shoulder, put a rubber boots on, walk 2 miles with that pickaxe to dig ditches so that plumbing could run underground. When I needed money for books, the next time you drive in the road, you're going to see those white lines or yellow lines. I used to paint those lines in 116 degrees in Trinidad. That was 17. At 19, I was accepted to Howard University, The Ohio State University, Washington State University, and Miami. I chose Howard, my first degree. Went on to Howard, did my degree in architecture. Went on to MIT, did my master's degree. Did my PhD at Morgan State. Went on to Northwestern University to do a Master's of Science in predictive analytics. I say that to you because, for me, this is personal. Because I know the importance of practical learning, right? And I know the fact of the matter is that somebody would have considered me dumb, right? Because I didn't do the normal things, but there was something that wasn't clicking in there. And think about how many millions of students we have that's not clicking, and all we're trying to do is to give them this two-dimensional world. What we're trying to do here is to prepare the next generation of students. And it could have been that these thousands of students who have engaged for 25 years at all those levels would not have had the imagination or would not have had the resistance to want to just not accept mediocrity. I used to tell my students mediocrity is like highs on my skin. It scratches me. Because I know you could do more than that. So for me, when I stand here and I talk and I represent Microsoft, I'm not a salesperson trying to push this. I'm somebody who's telling you about the art of the possible to get our next generation of students so that my granddaughter, who is 2 years old, will have the opportunity to excel. This is personal for me, and it should be personal for all of us. So I hope that the next time you think about students in your classroom or you think about technology, I hope, and you say, well, you know, you're distressed or you're despondent and you don't want to do it, I hope you get restless, because before you stand, a young man from a small little country on the world map called Trinidad that never went to high school, that went on to be a faculty, department chair, senior academic officer, college president, working for the #1 technology company in the world. Think about that. And think about the art of the possible.